it's lovely to see you. What sort of day have you had?
Well, a busy one, but nice because the weather was just absolutely glorious today. So literally, as soon as possible, we just flung the garden doors open and out we went. We've been outside pretty much all day, dragging the poor things in just to go and feed them and then send them back out again.
Right. So you've been with the children all day?
Yeah, I've been in ratio today, which is, the usual. We've got one member of staff off poorly, but that's fine. I just jump in, fill where I need to. And no, it was nice. It's just nice. Excellent. We even got across to the park as well.
Oh, wow. Look at you. I've been in front of a computer all day. I was doing a training, not doing one. I was receiving a training course today.
Oh, nice.
Not on a particular, nothing to do with children. So it wasn't so nice, but it was interesting. Well, we're going to talk about 2-year-olds this evening. We put temper tantrums into the title, which was a bit dangerous in this day and age, I feel.
I know.
And I generally have a whole list of things that I write, just a list of things that perhaps I'd like to cover in a spark debate, bring up, etc. But I've written nothing. And the reason I've written nothing is because I think that 2-year-olds are so diverse, so complicated, if I'm allowed to say that word, in the nicest possible way, really quite, it's a bit like working with babies. Lots of people don't like working with babies because they don't feel they get as much from them. I think that's rubbish. And I think 2-year-olds can be, people sometimes don't like working with 2-year-olds because they don't understand them and they find them quite challenging. What do you? How do you? I mean, obviously, you've got a love of 2-year-olds. You brought out this wonderful book, but I have been goes with Ducky. Do you want to introduce Ducky?
I should do. This is my little. Well, I say little. He's absolutely enormous. So this is Ducky. I was away on holiday, spotted him on a shelf, and I was like, "You're coming home with me."
Oh my goodness!
Ducky he's a new little thing that I've started doing through. You can just see it above me, the male practitioner bit, which is just above me. And Ducky is a font of all knowledge and to do with questions in early years. He's just answered one recently about recruitment, and Ducky knew the answer. So if you want to get in touch, you can, and you can ask, what would Ducky do?
Okay, all right, that's interesting. How did you manage to get him in your suitcase?
Thankfully, we've got very big suitcases and also very large luggage limits on the plane.
Oh, okay. You were going somewhere special then, obviously. Right, let's get back to this book. This book, it is so comprehensive. There's not, temper tantrum isn't in it, though. I'll tell you now. Couldn't find the word temper tantrum anyway, which I'm quite relieved about. But if anybody's working with 2-year-olds, I would definitely recommend it. You can actually dip in and dip out of it because the chapters are... we've got one, chapter 15 is about fostering early relationships, mark making. I'm just flicking here. Hold on, wait till another chapter comes up. They're quite short. Taking the leap from babbling to chatting. In fact, there are quite a lot of leaps in this book, aren't there, Glenn? Just a bit, yeah. I mean, so I'm very much a conversational person, and that's how the book is structured. It's very much about, like you say, you can dip into it. You don't have to sit there and read it from cover to cover. It's like, I just want to have a little something. And it's like having a conversation with a colleague. That was the kind of, or a conversation with another parent, if it's a parent reading the book. Because although written with, fellow practitioners in mind, it's also great for parents as well, particularly, when you're dealing with the uniqueness that is age 2. Because there is so much going on, particularly with brain development and lots of neurons firing up and like connections being made. There is so much. There is basically a whole New Year's Day or New Year's Eve firework display going on in the toddler's brain. That, there's going to be lots of things happening. And that's where, I don't like using the word, which is why, we're very glad we put it in inverted commas. Because everyone talks about a toddler tantrum. Well, it's not. It's just at some point this poor toddler just can't process anymore or overload.
Yeah, it's total overload, or there's something they particularly set their heart on, and basically this is their world. They want this one particular thing. It could be a cardboard box, or it could be somebody else's toy. And because you're like, no, you can't have that just now. Boom. It's just, we're just having that absolute, overload. And the only thing we can do is cry, scream, shout, throw things.
Yeah, it's losing control, isn't it? And that's really scary, I think.
This is
scary for an adult to lose control, let alone a child.
Well, this is exactly it. I mean, you hit the nail right on the head there when you said it's scary. This is what is exacerbating this emotion, this big feeling in a toddler is they've lost control. They're scared. They don't know what's happening, and they don't know how to get out of it. It's like if you put yourself in a maze and you literally can't get out. How do you feel as an adult? You're stuck and you can't get out, and you don't know which way to go, and the panic sets in, the heart rate starts going, and this is what's going on, and you've got the main bit is, though, you've got to let it happen. You have to let it happen because whilst it's big and it's scary and it looks awful, particularly like I'm thinking from a parent perspective, when you're out in the middle of town or in the middle of a supermarket, and they don't get that particular chocolate bar that they wanted, and it starts, and you're like, oh my word, and the parent goes bright red. I mean, right now I'm bright orange, but that's just my color. But this has got to happen. You've got to just take that deep breath, and you've got to let them process it, because they need to navigate their own way out of it. If we are constantly picking them up, cuddling them and going, it's okay, actually it's not okay. They're scared. They don't know what's happening, but they still need to navigate their own way out of it, because there's a learning process happening there.
I think it actually makes it worse, doesn't it? I mean, my view on the matter is that you stay nearby, you let them let them get rid of all of their emotions, and then you step in and console and perhaps talk about what's happened, etc. But interfering actually just makes the whole situation worse.
It does. It's like that saying, don't poke the bear. Basically your toddler is that bear. Don't keep poking at them. Are you okay? No, you're just adding fuel to that fire of the emotion that's going on. Please stop. And like you say, I mean, I'll be honest, I admit I was one of those people that were constantly jumping and that. But then as you kind of grow and develop in the role, and other training comes up, and you begin to understand a bit more, particularly about neuroscience, learning about neuroscience from birth onwards is a real game changer in nursery practice. It really is, because for me, I'm like, I've been poking this bear every time they're having a moment, an emotional moment. I need to step back. And like you say, that's what I do now. I'm there. I will, if they'll let me, I'll lie down beside them if they're throwing themselves on the floor, or either that, or I'll step back and I'll sit by where they can see me, but I'm not near them, let them have their moment. And when they're ready, my arms are open, come and get a cuddle and let's talk.
I can remember in one of my nurseries, it wasn't a 2-year-old, as it happens. It was a child, probably nearer 4. But obviously at that developmental stage, and in that respect, and they decided to have a full-grown meltdown just in the space where parents were coming in to collect the children. And in that scenario, we actually moved the child. We did actually pick the child up into the other room, which didn't have any children in at the time, and stayed with them. Because actually it would have made them worse by staying where they were. But, I would always say, you leave them alone, let them get on with it, and then step in afterwards. And we call it dysregulation now, don't we?
Yes.
Now, I have a problem with that because I think dysregulation can be for a load of different reasons. It doesn't mean that they're having a meltdown. It could be a child that's
particularly frustrated, or although often they'll have a meltdown if they're frustrated, but you know, they might not have got to that point yet. Or it could be a child that's hungry and whining, or a child that's needing some attention and is whining. You know, I see all those behaviours as dysregulation, and I don't actually like. The term temper tantrum, although it is very wrong, does give an indication about what is wrong with child.
Yeah.
Whereas dysregulation doesn't give us a reason behind it, or we have to explain. I don't know what it is. It just doesn't seem, for me.
There's a lot of terms for different, you know, dysregulation could mean a whole myriad of things. It could be the hungry, the tired, the thirsty.
Yeah, exactly.
They want a particular toy. There is a lot there. For me, I tend to go with, and again, it's maybe slightly blurry as well, but I prefer a big emotion, because that's what they're dealing with. It is an emotion. At the time, whenever this meltdown or whatever is happening, we don't know which emotion that is. But once the meltdown is over, that's when you can talk with the child and discover what it is, and then name that emotion that they have felt and why, and what we can then do to fix it.
Sorry, Dan, carry on.
No, that was it. Yeah, it was just, you know, it's naming it as well, but when the child is ready to name it.
Now, in our software, we actually we've renamed it now. It's bound to be dysregulation, but it's probably got a bit of more description about it. I should have looked it up really before coming on, but we has temper tantrums as a milestone. And we had a lot of criticism for that at one point. And I love people criticizing what we do, because we either explain or we modify, you know. And but I had to do a lot of explaining around how it is normal. It is normal behavior. It's something the child can't help. It's their body taking over, and it's a normal part of growing up, which was all taken in good faith. You know, I didn't have anybody leaving the software because we'd written this in. We're talking about brain development, but we're also now we're more conscious about our bodies, and our bodies naturally doing things that we don't have any control over, which is where resilience comes in, how we teach children eventually to become resilient and be able to manage how they feel. 2-year-old can't do that. They need a lot of help and support, don't they, in that respect?
They do. And I think that's the bit where, as a practitioner, you need to be aware of your children. Like, I feel most of us get to know our children and their uniqueness and what makes them tick. And I think once you know that, and once you understand, I mean, there was one particular child I've had in the past, and she was very prone to just having a meltdown about anything. And that was her. That was how she dealt with it. And she was a very loud crier. That was her thing. And it was like, okay. And it was that bit that you needed to let her do that. And then eventually, once she'd kind of got the worst of it out of the way, that's when you could jump in and start to talk to her. And then once she was ready, you could talk a bit more. And then eventually she calmed down. And then you could find out what was going on and what just escalated. Because with these big emotions, they can start from 0 to 100 in a millisecond. Because that's how it works. You know, it's interesting that, you know, in the past we have jumped in and gone, it's okay. But I think we're, you know, with more of awareness of kind of mental health and well-being as well, we need to move away from that it's okay, because no, obviously it's not okay, and we need to acknowledge that. And, you know, then let the child do this, and then kind of come back to them and go, right, okay, let's see what what learning happened from it? You know, what have we learned from this? What can we change, or what can we do differently?
Yeah, it's often, I mean, I would refer to it often as a clash of wills, or a lack of ability to communicate by the child, or even the adult, actually.
Yeah.
And in a nursery situation, I always, although obviously it's not nice to see a child in distress, it did tell us that they felt confident enough.
Yes.
You know, they were settled in enough. You know, they felt at home enough to be able to lose it, because none of us would lose, you know, none of us would lose control in an environment we didn't feel safe in. I always felt that it was a good thing. I might be wrong on that. We'll see what people think.
There is that element of trust, and again, it's building that relationship with the child and their family, which is hugely important, and it's what I think we all strive to do, is build that trusting relationship with our families. And if a child is comfortable and secure around you, you know, if they're upset, they will come to you, you know, because you are that trusted face, that trusted adult. And you know, that's something really, really special. You know, as a practitioner, if a child trusts you enough, when they're upset and they come straight to you, you know, acknowledge it, be there for them, you know, whatever you're doing, if it's, you know, put that to one side and focus on the child, because they have shown that immense trust and need for you to comfort them. And, you know, that's so special.
Yeah, I agree. But meltdowns isn't the only challenging scenario for a 2-year-old, is it? Often, I know we've got pushing and hitting and biting. Lots of biting.
Biting's a tricky one. It is, and I think whilst it's painful for the child that's been bitten, and it's obviously painful for the family of the child that is biting, because you've got to then have that conversation with them. It is a natural thing, and again, like you say, it's a communication thing for a lot of it, or it's a reactive thing.
It's a reaction often.
It is. It's a reaction.
Or it can be out of affection as well. Biting for young children, particularly if their parents play those sorts of games, you know, yum 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 yum, with them, or they, you know, they just get overexcited by seeing their friend or whatever.
I mean, I think that's the main one I've seen, is children just getting so, like, you know, excited like they do, and everything's going and they're very excited, and all of a sudden, whoops, the teeth. The teeth. And again, you know, you've got to think as well, it wasn't that long ago that they didn't actually have many teeth, and they're probably still learning what these.
And also, it wasn't that long ago that we were putting everything in their mouths. So you know,
why wouldn't you put your friend's arm in your mouth and see what it tastes like? You know, it's definitely that. But it's that bit where if it continually happens to the same child, so the same child's constantly getting bitten, I understand the frustration and the anger from parents. And, you know, it's that bit where they don't always feel that we are protecting their child, but we are doing everything we can. But it's and, you know, we're trying to find what the triggers are, if there's a particular thing. But quite often these triggers are like a moving goalpost, because it could be one thing constantly, which is great, which is wonderful, because we can focus in on that. But most of the time, it's something different. Like you say, it could be excitement, it could be tiredness, it could be hunger. It could, you know,
leave me alone.
It could be leave me alone. Yes, I mean, I've seen a lot of that as well. It could be a lot of leave me alone, because, well, you know, the other child wants to play and this child doesn't particularly want to. So the only way they've got of saying it is, you know, with their teeth.
Yeah. And we used to, I don't have my nurseries anymore, but we had a policy that we would give the language to the child. So we would say, leave me alone, you know, and give them that language, and hopefully they'd copy it. Or it's mine to keep their toy. It's mine.
Yeah.
You know?
The simple one we do, particularly for our younger ones, is no. with the hand as well, and we emphasize the hand, because if they don't always remember to say no, at least the hand's there, and they're using sort of non-verbal gestures as well,
that's
which is important, because the processing of the language is still developing, and at speed that they can't really.
And also they're having to take time.
Yeah.
The younger the child is, the more time they need to process that language too. And in a situation which is about to explode, that's quite difficult to take on board.
They don't have that time to process. It's like, there's a word I need to say here. What is it? Let me think for a moment. Oh no! Ow! You've already bitten me.
Dear. Something else I think about 2-year-olds. I mean, we accept that every child is unique, and every child learns at different rates and different things at different times. But I think with 2-year-olds, that's quite broad. We say, we recognise, don't we, in early years that the children are very different, etc. And as they grow older, they are their needs come more together. So you can teach a class of 8-year-olds the same thing in the same way as we do in our education system, whereas with younger children we certainly don't do that. But I think the 2-year-olds particularly, it's very broad, because they're beginning to, because the fact that they are there, how do I explain this? Their presence impacts all the other children around them in a group setting.
Yeah.
All right. And in the home environment, even if they've got older brothers and sisters, or even younger brothers and sisters, they're very much a presence. The 2-year-old is finding their place in the world, really, aren't they?
They are.
But I think, for 1 2-year-old, they could be quite behind in that respect, and then you could have another 2-year-old who's already potty trained and using language well, and seems very well adjusted to the world. So it can be quite a broad age group. And then we've got the ratios, haven't we?
Yes.
I
mean, there's that.
Let's talk about that. What ratio do you have in your preschool?
So we're actually 1 to 5.
You are?
Which for me, because I've worked in Scotland, that's the Scottish ratio has always been 1 to 5. So it does, for me, it worked. But my 2-year-olds and my 3 to 5-year-olds are all in the same room, because my setting was originally a playgroup. So it's always been that way. Our babies are in a separate room.
I think that's lovely.
It is, because like you said,
we had vertically grouped classes for our children above 2 and above. And it's much more normal. It's family.
Because the younger ones are learning from the older ones, particularly with, we were talking about language development there, and they're hearing a lot more than they would when it's just a group of 2-year-olds. They'll be hearing some babble and chatter that's going on for our younger 2s, and then our older 2, but when you've got 3 to 5s and the 2-year-olds together, I feel there's a lot more language development going on, because they're hearing more,
and there's more of a buffer. In many ways, the older children are replacing that member of staff in a way. That if it was a 1 to 4 ratio, I'm thinking, I'm not saying they are a member of staff, but it buffers the. We did run. We had in our biggest nursery, we had 22-year-olds altogether. We did have it on a 1 to 4 ratio, and I would always say it needs to be on a 1 to 4 ratio, personally. With all children, we have to tune into their needs, and but with 2-year-olds, I think we have to be even more clever at it. We have to have a sort of extra sense around 2-year-olds. To get there before they melt down, to step in before that child bite. I just think it's more of a hands-on.
It is. There's
as well.
You're moving around a lot more. So if you think about a 3 to 5 group, they don't need you as much.
No,
they don't need you as much. Obviously, I think we can all universally acknowledge that baby room, they need you constantly. They aren't. The adult has to be there, and the 1 to 3 ratio, absolutely right. Sometimes you feel like it needs to be 1 to 2, or just because of the needs that babies, our youngest children have. But 2-year-olds, they need quite a bit as well. They still need that time to explore and discover by themselves, and they absolutely should have that freedom to literally just pull things apart. And I'm a big believer in that. When I set up, when I ran rooms for 2-year-olds, I was a big believer in, I'd set up an invitation.
Heuristic play.
Yeah, heuristic play, or setting up an invitation to come and play. But I had a rough idea of what I would like the learning to be, but that didn't mean that was what the learning was going to be, because it's a case of let my 2-year-olds come in, step back, and I only come in when I'm needed, or when I need to add something, when I need to take something away, when I need to model some language. I'm just nearby. I'm not there because you need to be able to trust them as well, which is a big ask as well. If you feel that that I've heard many people say the pesky toddlers, and they're not. They're just beautiful creatures, but you need to trust them, and that's what I do. I trust them to explore and experiment, and I'll be there to help them, but I'm not going to be there to do it for them.
That's the other thing with 2-year-olds. Their concentration and their attention span is so short.
Yeah.
So I think it can be quite exhausting for. Let's talk about the adults. An adult that's working in a room with 2-year-olds, they have an awful lot to contend with during their day. Yeah. It's not just about getting them all hand washed and some nappies changed and all of that physical stuff, but it's all the emotional stuff that goes alongside, keeping up with the activities the children are doing, going from one to another, probably trashing, or what isn't termed as trashing, discarding things still.
Yeah, the hurricane through the room.
Sorry?
The hurricane through the room.
That's right. What's happening behind your back, and being responsible for that, even though we haven't got eyes in the back of our heads. We always used to say you've got to supervise the room with your back to the wall. So that just reminded me of that. We literally in particularly in our 2-year-old room, you'd always sit on the floor with the children with your back to the wall, so that you could see the majority of the room all the time and nothing was happening behind you. It's just reminded me of that. But I mean, the stress levels for practitioners working with 2-year-olds is probably higher than any other age group, I feel.
I think so, because you are, like you say, with a shorter attention span, you are constantly having to move from one activity to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. But in one setting I worked in with 2-year-olds, we had some absolutely lovely, calm moments. And I'm not just talking about sleep time. Although that was lovely. That was just bliss. But we'd have times where we would be sitting at the table for lunch, and it'd be nice because we would sit with them. We were part of that lunchtime, and that's another important thing. Yeah, absolutely. It's a hugely important thing that, and we would get a plate and we would sit, our chef was brilliant. She would make a little bit extra so that we would have some, and we could sit and model it, because trying to encourage a toddler to eat vegetables, fun. But if you're eating them, they're more likely to do it. And it's nice because you're part of their group, but you are constantly on the go. In the baby room, you're constantly on the go, but a lot of it is you're on the floor, or you're changing nappies, or it's routine. But with a toddler, you could be going from painting to cutting out to the home corner to, outdoor play, and you're there, here, there, every, and that changes.
And being on alert all the time, I think.
Yeah, you do. You're being alert to, like you say, to any big emotions that might be brewing, or to anything that might cause it. Any arguments that are about to break out, particularly with sharing. Sharing's always fun, but
they don't share.
They don't, exactly,
and they shouldn't need to share.
No, not right now, because
no, exactly.
What's theirs is theirs, and what's yours is theirs as well. But it's that bit where you are constantly alert to all of that, and you are constantly watching, but you're also watching for opportunities to enhance their opportunities to learn. They're busy building a sandcastle. Well, could you add something into that without interrupting it? Can you put something nearby so that they can build with it, or they can add to it? You are constantly thinking. With preschool, you can plan a little bit more, but you can also step back a little bit more, because they can go and get it for themselves.
Yes, they're more independent.
There's the independence there. But again, you're trying to teach that in toddlers as well. One thing myself and one of my colleagues did, we loved the fact that we actually got all of our toddlers to put their own coats on. Couldn't zip them up, but they could put their own coats on. And do you know what? We celebrated the fact that everybody could do it. Even some of our parents were like, how did you do that? Like, we just have a way of doing it. And, even in my current setting now, because I work with the same colleague, we do the same thing. And I work with two colleagues that I'd worked with previously. And that's what we do. We have the same method of putting our coats on, and that little bit of independence. And when you're celebrating,
the arms in and the coat goes over your head.
Hood to your toes, over the head it goes. It's brilliant. And some of our, one of our parents, she was literally about, like, he came out with his jacket and she went to go and take it off of him. He went, no. And he put it down and she went, what are you doing? And in front of me and in front of Mum, he did that, put his arms in, up over his head, arms in, there we go. She went, oh, is that what you're doing? Yeah, that's how we teach them how to put their coats on. But it worked.
The other thing about 2-year-olds, they can't wait, can they?
No.
And so if they can all put their coats on, that's great. They can all go in the garden at the same time.
Exactly. And that's one of the reasons we did it. It's because they want to get out. And, having a really good outdoor space and outdoor time is such... If you're inside the whole time, it's like a pressure cooker, and it's building and it's building. You're outside and they've got space to move, because toddlers need to move. They are naturally built to just go and run and jump and climb and do. They are physical beings, and that's what they need to do. And if you're outside a lot, we would be outside as much as possible with our toddlers. But again, teaching them to put their coat on means they can get out faster.
Yeah.
And that pressure cooker just drops. The pressure's gone.
And, going back to staff well-being, being outside is good for the adults too, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think that's one of the things.
And having regular staff breaks, I think, is also very important. And that can be quite difficult with 2-year-olds, because, a 2-year-old might be relying on that person to be about for their security. So, how that is managed, I think, is really important. A bit like parents saying goodbye when they leave in the morning rather than just disappearing. Staff should say, I'm just going to go and have a cup of coffee and I'll be back in 10 minutes. And so-and-so's here. She'll look after you if that's necessary.
Well, that was, a prime example of that. I had a little boy that had started. It was one of my key children. This is when I was a room leader. And it was that bit that he just became totally attached to me. And even if I left the room, because our room was basically across 2 rooms, so we had a corridor in between. So if you went from the main playroom through to our multi-purpose room, so we ate and then we did messy play, and it was everything in the other room. And if I went across there just to get something to come back, he would be upset. So that's what we did. We got to the point of saying, well, this is what I'm going to do. I need to go and get this, but I'll be right back. We had another child as well that missed mum so much, and it was just constant upset and everything else. So we managed that by actually not so much a visual timetable, but we had strips of card, bulldog clipped to this string coming down from the ceiling, and it was the elements of the day. It was our timetable.
We took them
It wasn't
off.
visual, but it was like every time a particular thing happened. So when we had snack, we took snack off, and you know, this timetable would slowly disappear, and that worked. So it's finding, again, like finding the uniqueness of the child and what is making them tick or what their need is. Then you can adapt your practice or your room routine to support that child.
Yeah. So like we used to encourage parents to leave something, because often children start nursery at 2 as well. So I think I think starting nursery at 1 is more difficult, but when they don't have that understanding of permanence. But, you know, if children can have something of their parents, you know, a purse or a bunch of keys or something, I think that can often help.
You had a little boy that liked mum's cardigan.
Yeah.
So mum's cardigan used to come in his bag.
I mean, that's something else. Comforters. I'm all for comforters personally. Bring them in. That's what I always advocate. Yes, we do need to look after them. And it is another thing for the adults to worry about, maybe. But for the child, it's so important to be able to have whatever it is. And photographs of people at home as well is very good for 2-year-olds.
Yeah, we used to have in the room where I was room leader, we used to have family portraits, like little photos of their family, and we would have them dotted around. And they were at the children's height, and we would frame them nicely, so they weren't just like photos stuck to
well, we had ours in a box, and they all laminated, and they got chewed. They moved up through the nursery. In fact, by the time they got to send them home at the end, before they went to school, they were pretty unrecognisable in many cases.
Oh no, ours were printed out and stuck, put in frames, so they were on the wall, so that they would come up and they would point and like, oh, that's my grandma, that and that's mummy and daddy, and sometimes it would upset them, and that's okay again, because it's understanding that emotion, and I think as well it was important that we acknowledge that emotion. It's like, oh, I can see, I get that you're feeling sad, but that's okay, because mummy's coming back later. I mean, we've had one child in my current setting who extended his day. He used to do just a morning session and is now staying on until the afternoon. And it's that bit that when he comes in the morning, we now acknowledge, it's like, now remember, today's your big day, so you'll be going home later. But, the next time you're in, it'll be your short day, but today's your big day. And we would talk about that and be open and honest with the child as well.
Yeah, well, that helps them understand their routines, and that gives them that security, doesn't it? Before they find out that they're staying for lunch or they're not going home after lunch or whatever. I think that's good. Well, I don't know how long we've been going for. Oh, we're doing all right. You have actually got a chapter in here. Oh, I've missed it, lost it now. Which I did read. Where is it? Oh, I'll find it in a minute. That's a bit better looking. About children's behaviour. Let me look at the front. Do you know what chapter I'm talking about?
I'm trying to have a look for it.
Here we are, chapter 16, guiding behaviour, positive discipline strategies, he called it.
I did. I don't like the D word, but I couldn't think of another word at the time, I don't think.
Well, it's how perhaps, yes, I get what you mean.
It's trying to make it, so that you understand.
Yeah, a bit like a temper tantrum.
It's
Everybody knows what a temper tantrum is.
Maybe I should have put the inverted commas around the discipline.
I did read this chapter. I haven't read because I'm just telling everybody, I haven't read this from cover to cover, but it's a really good book to dip into. Let me see something. Consistent boundaries you talk about in this chapter, and giving guidance Guidance is necessary. Validation of feelings should precede any discussion of behaviour. It's critical to acknowledge that toddlers' emotions are valid regardless of the behaviour that follows. And you've just said, I can see you're upset. I'm not sure if we should always presume that we know how children feel, though. I don't know if you know a lady, I'm talking to everybody here, called Amanda Peddle. And if you don't know, then go back and look at her Spark debates. She's very much around children understanding how their body feels. You know, so they might have butterflies in their tummy, or they might have an ache. I'm not very good at it because I'm not in tune with how my body reacts at all, unless it needs to go to the loo, or needs to sleep, or needs to eat. But she encourages children to young children to start to understand that their heart is thumping, and it's a natural body response, and they can't do anything about it. Okay, they need to acknowledge it, and then later on, as they grow older, they'll be able to calm down, breathe, do whatever they need to do to regulate themselves, rather than presuming that the child is feeling sad or the child is feeling cross or have you. It's really interesting what she's doing. I'm not saying what we're doing is wrong, though, Glenn. But I do think we need to be a bit careful about presuming that we understand how the child is feeling.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah, it's that.
And
bit,
then Amanda, and then we're alongside the spiders in your tummy, or your butterflies in your tummy, or however the child chooses to describe it. And I have experienced that. I know what that feels like. Then they can attach the word, the feeling word that goes with that. Now that could be excited, that could be dread, that could be worry. You know, we have butterflies in our tummies for all sorts of reasons. It could be fear, but to attach the word afterwards. But I know it's something that I have not, because I'm not working with children, been able to put into my practice. I wish I had some grandchildren, but I think it's quite interesting what she has to say on the subject.
Yeah.
So I'd encourage everybody to go and listen to that. She's done 2 webinars, 2 Spark debates, and she did do a webinar when we were doing webinars many moons ago as well. Just a different way of looking at it from a neurological way, you know, from neuroscience, and the fact that the body takes over. And we control our bodies as we get older, not when we're very little.
No, well, that's the thing. It's like the toddler just doesn't have that control yet.
No.
And that this kind of the nub of what we're talking about is that not lack of control. No, the undeveloped control is probably a better way of saying it. And the undeveloped control of their emotions. And that's it. It's like I said at the start, you've got to let them feel that emotion, because, you know, it kind of goes with what you're saying about the butterflies in the tummy or the thumping heart. They've got to feel all of that in order to make that connection. Because again, like I say, you know, with everything going on in the brain and everything developing, if they don't get to feel that feeling, that physical feeling of emotion, then they won't connect with what it is and what it was about and what caused it.
I think that's the point she's trying to make.
Yeah.
That's right. And the other thing is, what was I going to say about adults? Oh, it's gone now. It'll come back to me in a minute. It's gone, sorry. It'll come back to me, probably just before
there's kind of that consistency as well in the approach, because if you've got, say, you know, you've got a room of 10 toddlers and 2 members of staff, then, you know, are both staff members approaching, you know, these emotions in the same way? Because if they're not, then there's an inconsistency, and that's going to create more problems as well. So it's understanding that, as a team, that, you both acknowledge that these children have to have these emotions. They have to be allowed to happen. I mean, I've worked with some staff, that have been in the business quite a long time. And it's, these ones that, they know what is happening and they don't particularly want to change because that's what they did about 30, 40 years ago. But it is, as we develop an understanding of these things, then the approach does have to change, but it's that consistency which helps, our toddlers.
Definitely. But I would never advocate just 2 members of staff in a room for any age group, particularly 2-year-olds. I mean, it wasn't my first nursery, it was my second nursery, but we hadn't had babies before. And we had 6 babies with 2 members of staff. And it was really, really hard. If one member of staff wasn't feeling 100%, or, there were particularly difficult children in on a particular day, it was really hard work. I would always, for anybody who's listening who's thinking of setting up a nursery, I'd always have 3 members of staff in a room. I think, and we changed that very quickly. We went from, we actually ended up having, help. It's not that long ago, but I can't remember. We had, I think, 5 members of staff on duty in a building with babies. So we had lots of babies together, but for the staff's sake, I think we often forget about staff wellbeing. I keep bringing it up, don't I? Mm-hmm. I mean, working with children is really tough anyway. Mm-hmm. And if you're working, as a pair, you're relying on your teammate, a lot. So I think if you have more than 2 people in a room helps. But working with 2-year-olds, I think, is particularly stressful. Yeah. Because you're analysing everything all the time, and you're giving all the time. You were talking about learning opportunities, but you're also giving language all the time.
Yeah.
So you're on the go all the time, and as you said earlier, it's more difficult actually to step completely back and just observe. You're they're all in each other's pockets, literally.
On as well, aren't you? You're narrating.
Sorry, say that
again.
You're
narrating their play, and it's like you say, it's mentally draining. And I used to find that as well when I was working constantly with 2-year-olds. It's like you go home with a headache because you've been thinking all day, and you constantly have to think and adapt and change, and talk and narrate and explain. And there's all that going, toddlers and questions. They do love a good question.
Oh, yeah.
And,
why?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because.
Why?
Because Ducky said so. But it's that bit where, you do. And it is that emotional well-being and that support. And it's having each other's back.
And also having strategies, giving children, 2-year-olds, choices, so you don't get a no. So you don't get them putting their foot down and saying, no, I'm not, in their own way. Giving them choices that are both acceptable, and also giving them lots of warning. In a little while, and that'll be a split second for them. In a little while, we're going to put our coats on and we're going to go out in the garden. Or in a little while, we're going to put this away because we're going to have our snack. If you do snack as one group, which we did actually. But in small groups, we did it in small groups throughout the nurseries, rather than one big group for snack, but with a member of staff. But even so, I think they need lots and lots of warning. And that they're often the times when the child will dissolve into tears because they're at a loose end if it's not managed properly. So I think there's a lot of tips and tricks with 2-year-olds.
Transition.
And if a parent is listening, a parent's busy, they've got things to do. They're in many ways they're in the same situation. You know, they've got lots of things that's happening around them. You've got to get older children off to school or what have you. And we've got this 2-year-old that doesn't want to get dressed. You know, that parents are under just as much pressure in many ways.
They are. I mean, one of the things, we were talking about transition point, and like tidy up time is always a good one with toddlers because they don't. I mean, I think it took me years to learn that actually, let's go and tidy up is not the right phrase to use with a toddler. And, we changed it to, let's put this back where it belongs. And that worked a lot better because tidy up could literally mean throw everything into a box. That's tidy. Well, yeah, technically it is, but it's not putting things back and we'll never find it later. But encouraging children to put things back where they belong was an absolute game changer for us, that, things were getting tidied up because let's get ready to go out, but we need to tidy up and put everything back where it belongs first. And that helped.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Excellent. Well, the chat's been very quiet, so obviously we haven't had any questions. We haven't had anybody contradict anything that we've said.
That's a good start.
So that's good, isn't it? But on the recording, we do want people to respond to the recording, and also Glenn and I are very open to being reached out to if you need anything in many ways. You'll find a bit more about what I do in a minute on the end of this. Is there anything else you wanted to cover though, Glenn, before we pull this to a close?
No, I think we've covered quite a bit. I mean, I think, the main bit is they're just complex and wonderful beings. And, this is, I just love working with toddlers because you don't know. I mean, there's the saying in early years that, every day is different. Well, working with toddlers every 5 minutes is different. And that's just brilliant. It's hard work and it's not for the faint-hearted, but you will find so rewarding working with them.
I think you do get staff that like to work with 2-year-olds, just like you have staff that like to work with babies or preschoolers.
Yeah.
We all find our niche, don't we? But I don't think we should write 2-year-olds off any more than we would write off working with babies. And that's what I'm trying to say.
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I'm quite lucky where I am that, yes, I get to work with 2-year-olds, but also I have a day where I'm in babies and I love my babies too. So it's brilliant. So
is that the next book? Have you got another book on the horizon?
Oh, come on now. That took me 2 years to write, Catherine. I'll have to think about it. But right now, yes, I mean, I have to say, I have my copy here as well. This is the original one. This is edition number 1.
Does yours feel nice as well?
It does.
Yeah, I love the feel of this book. It's quite tactile.
I mean, I have to say, I didn't know what it was going to feel like until it arrived from the printers, and I'm like, yeah.
They did that right, didn't they?
They did.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you very much for your time, Glenn.